The city skyline stretched across the glass walls of penthouse office, a kingdom of light and shadow that belonged to the man alone, Jungkook. He sat in his high back leather chair, a glass of whiskey resting between his fingers. The golden liquor reflected the dim glow of the office, swirling lazily as he tilted the glass. His other hand, resting on the polished mahogany desk, tapped an absent rhythm, calculated, controlled, like the man himself. The world outside saw him as a god, untouchable, merciless. Inside this wall, he was worse, a predator. A man who built an empire on shattered dreams and buried ambitions. His phone buzzed, breaking the heavy silence. With a slow exhale, he glanced at the screen. A message from a Park Jimin, his most trusted employee. Sir, I need a moment of your time. Jungkook's lips twitched into something resembling a smirk. Jimin was one of the few who had earned the right to ask for favors, but even loyalty had its limit. Send him in, he ordered, through an intercom. A few moments later, the office door opened and Jimin stepped inside. He walked with confidence, but there was hesitation in the way he adjusted his tie, an unusual nervousness that did not go unnoticed. Jungkook leaned back, studying him. You have 1 minute. Jimin swallowed, nodding. It's about my sister. The words hung in the air, unexpected. Jungkook's expression remained unreadable, but his finger still against the desk. Jimin continued, choosing his words carefully. She just graduated. She is struggling to find work, and I was hoping. Jungkook cut him off with a single sharp word. No. Jimin stiffened. You haven't even heard me out. I don't need to. Jungkook set his glass down with a quiet clink. I don't hire out of pity, and I certainly don't hire people just because they happen to be your family. She is qualified, Jimin insisted. That's irrelevant. Jungkook's voice was cold, final. A heavy silence settled between them. Outside the city pulsed with life, but inside his office there was only tension, thick and suffocating. Jimin exhaled sharply, his jaw tightened. Just look at her resume. That's all I ask. Jungkook stared at him for a long moment, then sighed. He leaned forward, holding his hands atop the desk. What's her name? Jimin hesitated before answering. Park Wyan. The name meant nothing to him, just another person in a world full of names he would never bothered remembering. Yet, something in the way Jimin spoke it, the careful way he protected it, piqued Jungkook's interest. Slowly, he reached for the folders Jimin had placed on his desk. His finger brushed the cover, but he didn't open it. Instead, he smirked. I will think about it. A lie. He didn't think about things, he decided them. And though he didn't knew it yet, this was the moment it began. The first move in a game that would soon consume them all. He just hadn't realized yet that he wasn't the one in control. Not this time. Not with her. The glass doors of Jeon Industries loomed ahead like the entrance to a kingdom built on a power and fear. Wyan hesitated just outside, gripping the strap of her bag tightly. The morning sun reflected against the towering skyscraper, its steel and glass structure gleaming like a beast, waiting to swallow her whole. She had spent hours preparing for this moment, rehearsing interview answers, memorizing company policies, but now, standing here, she felt small, insignificant. Her brother Jimin had always warned her about this place, about the man who ran it. Jeon Jungkook. She had never met him, but she knew of him. Everyone did. A billionaire, ruthless, unforgiving, a man whose name sent shiver down the spine of those who dare to whisper it. And today she was stepping straight into his world. With a stunning breath, she walked inside. The receptionist barely spared her a glance as she directed her toward the executive floor. Wine heels clicked softly against the pristine marble, her heart hammering in her chest. As they rode the elevator up, the walls felt like they were closing in, and then with a soft ding, the door slid open. A long hallway stretched before her, leading to a pair of dark wooden doors. Jungkook's Jeon office. She swallowed hard, a deep breath, a final moment of hesitation. Then she knocked. Come in. The voice was smooth yet cold. A command, not a request. Wine stepped inside, and her world shifted. The office was massive, more like a penthouse than a workspace. Floor to ceiling, window framed, the city skyline casting a long shadow across the polished black floor. The air smelled of expensive whiskey and something darker, something intoxicating. And then there was him, Jungkook Jeon. He sat behind an enormous glass desk, dressed in a tailored black suit that molded to his frame like a second skin. His dark hair was perfectly styled, a few loose strands falling over his forehead, a watch gleamed on his wrist, the kind of timepiece that cost more than the most people home, but it was his eyes that unsettled her the most. They were deep, unreadable pools of obsidian, studying her like a spaceman under a microscope, calculating, assessing. You are Jimin's sister. His voice was low, deliberate. Wine nodded. Yes, sir. He leaned back in his chair, fingers stippled beneath his chin. Why do you want to work here? She strengthened her posture, forcing her voice to remain steady. Because I believe I have the skill required for. I don't care about the rehearsed answer. His interruptions was a swift, slicing through there like a blade. She froze. Jungkook tilted his head slightly, watching her reaction. I'm not interested in what you think. I want to hear. Wine clenched her hand together, her nails pressing into her palm. I need this job. Something flickered in his eyes. Amusement, interest, honesty. He liked that. He rose from his chair in one fluid movement, stepping around the desk. The air in the room thickened as he approached, his presence suffocating. He stepped in front of her, too close. Wine forced herself not to move. Not to show the weakness, Jungkook's gaze trailed over her, slow and deliberate. Not in a way that was inappropriate, but in a way that felt like he was peeling back layers, trying to see beyond the skin and flesh, down to her very core. You're nervous, he observed. She met his gaze, her chin lifting slightly. Should I be? A smirk hosted over his lips. Yes. The word was quite promise, a warning, a threat. Wine swallowed hard, but she refused to look away. A long silence stretched between them before Jungkook finally spoke again. You're hired. She blinked. Just like that. He smirked, stepping back. Just like that. Some, something about the way he said it sent a chill down her spine, as if she had just walked into a trap and the predator was waiting. The world outside moved on, unaware. The city light flickered in a rhythmic pattern. Taxis rushed by. People lived, breath, love, completely oblivious to the storm brewing behind Jungkook Industries' walls. But here, inside his empire of glass and steel, something dark was taking a root. It started with a single name, unspoken and passing unimportant to everyone else, but not to him. Park Wyan. Jungkook should not have cared. She was an employee, a fleeting presence in his world. He had seen thousands of faces before hers, read countless resumes, hired and fired people like they were nothing but chess pieces, and yet from the moment she stepped into his office, something shifted. She was nothing like the woman who threw themselves at him, desperate for a taste of his wealth, his power. No, she was different. She didn't shrink under his gaze. She didn't shudder in a fear or try to flatter him. She held herself together even as his presence suffocating the room. It should have annoyed him, but it fascinated him, and now he couldn't stop. It began with watching. Jungkook told himself it was curiosity. That is why, late at night, long after the office had emptied, he found himself pulling up the security footage. The screen flickered to life, grainy black and white image capturing moment he wasn't supposed to see. Wine at her desk, chewing on the end of her pen, lost in her thoughts. Wine rubbing her temple, sighing in frustration. Wine stretching after a long hour, her head tilting back, her throat exposed. His finger clenched around his glass of whiskey. She had no idea, how could she, that while she moved through her day oblivious someone was watching, studying, memorizing. Jungkook leaned back, a slow smirk curving his lips. He had never been the type to want something he couldn't have, but when He wasn't sure if he wanted to possess her or destroy her. The unsettling feeling at first, Wine brushed it off. The misplaced files, the way her emails were sometimes opened before she even clicked on them, the feeling of being watched. It was just paranoia, the stress of a new job, of navigating an unfamiliar world. At least that's what she told herself, until it started getting worse. One evening, long after most of her colleagues had left, she was in the break room, pouring herself a cup of coffee. The office was eerily silent, the hum of the vending machine the only sound. Then, a noise, soft, barely audible. Like the faintest shift in the air, the quiet sound of breathing, she turned sharply. Nothing, the hallway stretched empty before her. The glass walls reflected only her own startled expression. Still, the feeling didn't leave her. She set the cup down with a trembling hand. She wasn't alone, even if she couldn't see him. She knew somewhere in the shadows someone was watching. Jungkook's obsession didn't just stop at watching. No, that wasn't enough. Watching meant distance, and distance meant she still had a choice. So he began to take them away. It started subtly. A colleague, someone she had laughed with, shared lunch break with, and suddenly transferred to another department. A recruiter from another company reached out to her, offering a better opportunity. The offer was rescinded the next day. She didn't know that Jungkook had made a call, that with a single word he had shut every door except the one that led to him. She was trapped. She just didn't know it yet. That night, Wine left the office late. The streets were quiet, washed in the glow of a street light. The air was thick with the scent of rain, the distant sounds of siren echoing through the city. She clutched her coat tighter around herself, her heels clicking against the pavement as she walked. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out. A known number. Her heart shuddered, hesitant. She answered, "Hello." Silence. Then, "You shouldn't be walking alone at night." Her breath caught in her throat. The voice was deep, smooth, familiar. "Jungkook." A chill ran down her spine. "How did you get my number?" A soft chuckle, slow, amused, and then the line went dead. Vine stood frozen. Her finger tightened around the phone. She turned her head, scanning the street, and then she saw it, a black car, parked across the road, engine idling. The tinted window made it impossible to see inside, but she could feel him watching, waiting. Her heartbeat roared in her ears as she forced herself to move. She quickened her pace, practically running the last few blocks to her apartment. The moment she locked the door behind, she let out a shaky breath. She was being ridiculous, right? But she peeked through the blinds. Her stomach dropped. The car was still there, and it wasn't leaving, and the game begins. Jungkook watched from the car, finger tripping lazily against the steering wheel. She was scared. Good. She was finally noticing. He leaned back, exhaling slowly, the shadow swallowing him whole. She could run, she could lock her doors, pretend she was safe, but it didn't matter because she was already his. She just didn't know yet. The light in the wine apartment flickered against the dark, an unsteady glow, barely holding back the shadow. The city outside hummed with life, but inside the silence is suffocating. She stands near the window barely, breathing. The edge of the curtain pinched between the trembling fingers. The black car is still here, unmoving, watching. Her skin prickles. It could be anyone, a random driver, someone taking a call, but deep down she knows it's him, Jungkook Jeon. Her finger tightened around the fabric. The past few weeks have been a slow descendant into something twisted, an unseen force tightening around her, suffocating her, pulling her closer to a man she wants nothing to do with, and now he is outside, waiting. She let the curtain slip back into the place, stepping away from the window, her heartbeat hammering against her ribs. This isn't paranoia. It's real, and she needs to make it stop. The next morning, the tension lingers like a sickness under her skin. The elevator ride at the top floor stretched on forever. The polished chrome reflect back an image of herself she barely recognized. Lips pressed into a thin line, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. The door slides open, and there he is, Jungkook, stand near the floor to ceiling window, hands in his pocket, dressed in a sharp black that blends into the cold morning light. He couldn't turn when she entered, but he knew she is here. The air thickens, charged as she forces herself forward. I need to talk to you, she says. Voice steady despite the way her skin burns under his presence. Slowly he turned. His eyes drag over her, lingering, deliberate, a slow smirk tug at the corner of his lips. Good morning to you too, Ryan. Her stomach twisted. This game, whatever it is, needs to end. She crossed her arms, jaw tightened. Were you outside my apartment last night? A pause, subtle, calculated, then, why do you ask? His voice is smooth, unreadable, but his eyes, they gave him away. There is something dark there, something satisfied. Her breath catches. You were. He doesn't answer, doesn't deny it. Just watch. A predator savoring the moment before the kill. A shiver crawls down her spine. She takes a step back without thinking, and that's when it happened. His smirk falters, the amusement slipping just enough for something else to peek through. Something more dangerous. She's afraid of him, and he doesn't like that. In an instant, the space between them vanishes. She barely has a time to reach before he's in front of her. The air shifting, charge, his hand left, not to touch, not yet, but close enough that she feels the heat of him, the quiet threat beneath his presence. Why are you scared? He murmurs. She swallows, forces herself to hold her ground. Because you won't leave me alone. A ghost of a smile. I never said I would. Her pulse spike. You're my boss. And you're crossing a line. Jungkook tilts his head, studying her like she's something to be figured out, owned. A line you think exists but doesn't. Her breath shuddered. The room feels smaller, the walls pressing in. This isn't a conversation, it's a warning. She needs to get out of here. Without another word, she turns sharply, heading for the door, but then, don't run from me, Ryan. The quiet command rooted her in a place. She gripped the handle, knuckle white, but she opened and leave him alone. Jungkook was in his thought when Jimin's voice cut through the office, sharp with disbelief, thick with anger. The silence that follows is suffocating. The entire floor freezes as the weight of his fury settles in. But Jungkook doesn't flinch. He leans back in his chair, fingers stepped, gaze calm, cold, dangerous. Interesting. Jungkook muses, tilting his head. You say her name like it belongs to you. Jimin's hand curls into fist. She's my sister. I smirk, and the casual cruelty in that single word sets Jimin off. He storms forward, slamming his palm against the desk. The force rattled the crystal glass of whiskey at Jungkook's side, but the man himself remained unfazed. You have been watching her, Jimin grits out, eyes blazing, controlling her. What the hell do you think you are doing? Jungkook exhales slowly, deliberate, protecting her. The sheer audacity sends Jimin reeling, protecting her. You are suffocating her. You are a better man for her than anyone else could be. Jungkook cuts in smooth. His voice devoid of doubt, and I always get what I want. Jimin stiffens, his fingers tighten on the desk as realization drawn. She doesn't want you, Jungkook. Something in the air shifts, the temperature dropped. The amusement in Jungkook's gaze vanished, replaced by something much darker. She will. The promise is soft, dangerous. Jimin blood turns ice cold. You are insane. He breathed, straightening. Stay the hell away from her. I swear to God, if you. He doesn't get to finish the moment. The moment the word left his mouth, Jungkook moved fast.